Hi, everyone. Oh, come on, you could do better than that. How's everyone? It's a good day. It's a sunny day. Thank you for everyone for being here today. If you're here, whether you're a realtor, you're here to find something that won't last forever. You're looking for timing. If you're an investor and maybe you missed out on investing in Facebook or Instagram or Toronto in the 90s or 2000s or Manhattan or crypto, you're here because you don't want to miss out on CMHC MLI Select. We're going to talk about a lot, if you've been here before, about what we're doing with CMHC MLI Select in Alberta, a lot of updates on what we have coming in Ontario. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jake to get started. Let's go.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith. I fell in my own trap. I didn't push the unmute button, you know? We still make mistakes every day. What can I say? But we're on track. This is the first time we've ever done one of these seminars in basically the summer. I mean, it's 19 degrees today. It's absolutely crazy. The sun is shining on Toronto. I'm feeling great. I hope you guys are feeling great. We have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about today. But the very first thing I'm going to say is probably a little bit scary. Real estate is dead, right? That's what everyone's telling me. I talk to agents every single day, whether I'm trying to recruit them or they're part of our team or we're trying to do deals and MLI, pre-construction, resale. All I ever hear is the market is slow, the market is hard, the market is dead. Real estate is dead. Not. The real estate is not dead. These slides are out of order, unfortunately, so I got to jump through. But we sold 250 MLI units in January. All firm, $70 million worth of product. So if real estate is dead, it's not dead for Meta, it's not dead for CMHC MLI, it's not dead for the stuff we're going to be talking about here today. Whether you are an agent in this room or whether you are a buyer looking for places to put capital that is risk-adjusted, offering amazing returns, real estate is not dead. Unfortunately, these first three slides got out of order. We were rushing to find a non-copyright Borat slide to throw in there, and we put it in the wrong spot. So I have to back up and give my little intro speech. Some of you may have heard this before, but this is Fries oder Stirb. And you might be saying, why is Jake speaking German? It's a little bit out of character. But what it means sink or swim. And it goes with that whole real estate is dead thing. Whether, again, you're a realtor trying to figure out how to keep your career going, or whether you are an investor trying to figure out where to place capital that actually makes money. You can adapt or you can die. And we certainly need to adapt in this market, okay? The traditional means of investing that people are used to are not working. How many people in this room bought pre-construction? How many people in this room's pre-construction are in a bit of pain right now, right? So you can adapt or you can die. You can keep doing what you've always been doing, or you can move on to new products. And I love this quote. If you've been to these seminars before, I will always have this quote. I don't care how annoying or long it's up here. 90% of all millionaires became so through owning real estate. More money has been made in real estate than in all other industrial investments combined. The wise young man or wage earner of today invests in real estate. And it was Andrew Carnegie, billionaire, Carnegie Steel. Half of downtown New York is named after the guy. I'm pretty sure that's where they put their big Christmas tree every year. So the question I always pose to the team, to the audience, whether, again, you're an agent here or whether you are an investor looking to make wealth, is how many of you have invested in real estate? Put up your hands. Come on. This is a participation seminar. Okay. And how many of you have become millionaires through investing in real estate? Okay. This is a good crew. That means we have a lot of buyers in here we can work with. But one thing that you'll probably notice is many fewer people put up their hand about becoming a millionaire than about people who invested. And the question always is why, right? And my proposition, my supposition, I don't know, one of those is the correct word, is that it's because we've been doing it wrong. We've been doing it at a retail level for the most part. You have been trained to save up your money, buy a condo, buy a townhouse, add a legal basement, and hopefully generate some money, right? But you cannot get rich doing that. And maybe it's society's fault, maybe it's the education system's fault. They don't teach average retail investors how to actually get rich investing in real estate. They teach you how to maybe save a nest egg, save a little money for your kid when they go to university, that kind of thing. But they do not teach you how to become financially independent. And that is more of what we're trying to talk about today with MLI. So as I said, these slides are out of order. We'll skip right past that. So what is CMHC at the most basic level? Well, it's the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's a federal bureaucracy, a federal program that is designed to create financing solutions, including mortgage insurance for buyers to encourage housing. It's as simple as that when you distill it down. Their goal is to get housing one way or another in the hands of Canadians, right? Now, there's been a big change to the MLI program, so we decided to just put this right up at the front. And if you want to take a picture of this, I'd recommend it, because if you're interested in MLI, focused on MLI, and you've heard about all the uncertainty and what's going on, they've made a quick change. So I put this at the very front of the deck. It's a little out of order with our whole presentation, but I thought it is the most important thing to talk about today. But I'll distill it down very, very simply. CMHC was getting a little bit unhappy that people were utilizing this program to buy up a lot of single-family homes. And I will happily go on camera on a live stream that there's probably 100 plus people on and say we were a big part of that. We sold a lot of detached homes as commercial investments. And one way or another, whether you agree with it or not, they have decided they don't want that. Maybe the optics of it are wrong, whatever. I'm not a politician. I'm only here to try and make money. So their policy update essentially is engineered to remove detached product from the MLI program. They did that with two possible options. Either you can have as many buildings as you want, but it has to be on a single lot. So you have one lot, one title. You can have 5 million buildings on it, 5 buildings on it, 3 buildings on it, whatever you want. Or if it's on multiple lots, it has to be a single connected structure with at least 5 units within it. Not a super complicated policy update, as they call it, but it just clarifies a lot of things. Since you generally cannot build more than one detached home on a single lot, it basically is just saying we don't want detached homes being part of a commercial investment plan. So simple as that. You guys can all go home now. Update's over. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, whether I like it or not. I think it's a huge mistake. You can read me in the Globe and Mail talking about it and being very angry at CMHC about it, but we're just here to understand what we can do. Now, the good thing is we protected all of our purchases over the last little while, and we don't have any files that are essentially in jeopardy or at risk because of this change, and we've been heavily focused more on the infill type product, 6-plexes, 8-plexes, 10-plexes that are extremely compatible with CMHC. And based off this policy update that came out on February 26th, we basically have an open mandate to sell as much of that product as we want without fear or hesitation that there might be a change to that policy anytime in the near future. So that's it. It's extremely simple. That's the update. Not a lot else to discuss on that front. So let's talk about a couple stats here. Edmonton is hot. Edmonton is very hot. I mean, I just put up a stat that we sold 250 units in a single month, $70 million of real estate. Edmonton is very hot, and there's a whole load of reasons why Edmonton is hot right now, and we're going to discuss it. We've got 62 slides to keep you guys here till nearly midnight, okay? But the other thing that's happening is Ontario is next. Ontario is coming, and I recommend you take out your cameras because I'm going to tease some things to you in a moment here. But why is Ontario next? I have spent so many seminars talking about how it does not make sense in Ontario over and over again. You can watch them. They're on YouTube. You can probably scroll through the group chats and see me call it Ontariable. It's my favorite joke. So why are we now saying Ontario is hot? Because now pricing is starting to make sense. Municipalities are starting to realize they can't rip you off and charge exorbitant fees. Not Toronto. Toronto still wants to rip you off everywhere. But other municipalities within Ontario have woken up. They realize that charging 30% of the cost of a home being taxes and fees doesn't make sense. The trades are sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They've lowered their prices on bids. The materials have come down because no one is buying them, because housing starts are down like 60%. Turns out free markets work. They just take a little bit of time. So Edmonton is hot and Ontario is next. And rather than making you guys sit through all the education, we decided to put it right here and give you a tease of what's coming. And if you look at this pricing, this is a 12-plex in Ontario for $3.8 million. That's cheaper than a lot of the 12-plexes or 10-plexes that we have in Calgary. That's why I'm selling it. I wouldn't bring you projects in Ontario if they weren't solid fucking gold, okay? $3.8 million to own 12 doors in Ontario. 6 months ago, this did not exist. Even 3 months ago, this did not exist. I would not have even been crazy enough to come up here and offer it to you guys. But there's some other cool benefits we have in Ontario that we don't get in Alberta, which we'll talk about later. The HST rebate, pretty sexy stuff, because the way we price projects here is very different than the way we price them in Alberta. HST is included in that price, meaning when you apply for the purpose-built rental rebate, you're getting that back. We'll talk about it more. This is just a teaser, but I want to quickly show you this. I'm only going to keep other 5 seconds. Take all your photos. This will be available online, the full, beautiful package on Friday for you guys. I will throw in a little plug that for Meta agents, they're going to have it to sell tonight, but for the rest of you guys, it will be available Friday. But regardless, we have a whole lot of inventory coming in Ontario, 300 plus units in the pipeline ready to go, all similar pricing. All of it works at 5% down. Someone else sent out an e-blast today for Ontario at 10% down. We are at, you can see it, if I can know how to use a laser pointer, 5% down in Ontario. Ontario is next. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it up here. So let's get back to the boring stuff and teach you guys all about CMHC. So CMHC has its 2 arms. You know, everybody knows CMHC for its residential lending. You want to get your first condo, you want to get your first house, you can get up to $1.5 million loans at 90-10, up to 30 years, and you get a little bit better of an interest rate because it's an insured mortgage, you're paying a premium. But what most people don't know about is their commercial lending department. They have many programs on the commercial side mandated basically by the feds to help them deliver housing one way or another. So it just goes back to their core mandate, get housing in the hands of Canadians. So MLI Select is one of those programs. It's the kind of cream of the crop. They have MLI, they have MLI Select, they have ALCP, there's a whole bunch, but MLI Select is kind of the best one. What it is mortgage loan insurance for multi-unit developments, which they call 5 or more units. And they give you tiered incentives based on the affordability, the accessibility, and the energy efficiency. So just jumping out of order a little bit here, back at the beginning we did that policy clarification. The only update that this slide should have, if I had more time on my hands, is that it should say all touching each other or on one lot, right? No longer can you buy, even like a semi-detached is not allowed because that would be on 2 lots. It has to be a single lot or it has to be a block of towns that is more than 5 units all touching. That's CMHC's rules, nothing we can do, that's what we can sell. So how do you qualify a project? Well, obviously we know it has to be single lot, single title, or 5 lots or 5 units touching. But more importantly is this chart. Now I've seen in the past lots of people take photos of this. No need, guys. If you just type into Google CMHC MLI Select, the very first link will be their website. This chart is right there, nice and pretty for you in high resolution on the page, okay? Now, make sure when you're looking at it, you're looking at the new construction one because they also do resale buildings and the system is a little bit different. We primarily focus on new construction because it's much juicier, okay? But essentially, your goal is to get points, right? And the more affordability or the more energy efficiency or accessibility you put in, you get these points, 50, 70, 100, et cetera, et cetera. You don't really need to know all the details of those elements. What you need to know is more here. that when you get to 100 points, you get the good stuff. With 100 points, you're able to get 95% loan-to-cost financing. You're able to get a 50-year mortgage, and you have limited recourse on that loan, which means that your personal exposure if something goes wrong is limited, right? They're not coming after you for the full nugget, depending on a bunch of circumstances. There's some other really cool benefits I'll explain, but these are the highlights, right? Because the goal here is that you can put a little bit of money in, and you can end up in a cash flowing position because you have such a nice spread out loan, 50 years. And where else on earth can you get a 50-year amortization on a loan? I don't know of anywhere. If anyone knows, please let me know. As far as I'm aware, this is basically the best lending program that exists on the planet for all intents and purposes. So what are these points, right? What is the affordability? What is the energy efficiency? What is the accessibility? What are these requirements? Well, the most important one to understand is affordability. Whether you are looking at projects in Ontario or in Alberta, the affordability is the one that gets people's ears up because they often misunderstand it from low-income housing. Affordable housing is not low-income housing, okay? Low-income housing is government programs where they pick a tenant for you, they put the tenant in, you're getting your rent paid by the government, you have no say, and that person, you're basically stuck with them. Affordable just means that CMHC runs a formula on every community within Canada, neighborhood by neighborhood, and comes up with a rental benchmark, whatever that may be, and you have to rent a certain percentage of your units at or below that number. The formula is 30% of the median income, but they also play with it a little bit because some neighborhoods have such a high income that it just doesn't even look right, per se, right? But essentially, let's say for Edmonton example, it's $1,665 a month. If you go max affordability, that's 25% of your units. So on an 8-plex, that's 2 of your units. You have to rent them at or below $1,665. As I said, it does not mean you're picking undesirable tenants. It does not mean you're building a slum building and you're gonna have problems. It simply means you have to be creative when you design the building. Smaller units, higher auxiliary fees. CMHC only speaks to the dwelling. So you can have an affordable unit and you can charge 5 times the normal amount for the parking spot. You can charge 5 times the normal amount for the locker, whatever it is that you need, right? Or the unit can be smaller, it can be finished in a more basic fashion. They can't really speak to that. As long as it is a legal building code compliant dwelling, it's an affordable unit. So that's why we focus primarily on new construction, because that means we're not inheriting a 50-year-old building where we have to make a 1,500 square foot 2-bedroom affordable. We can make it a basement. We can make it a studio. We can make it facing the garbage bins or whatever we need to do. We can put basic vinyl and linoleum in that unit while the other units get nice quartz undermount, blah, 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 right? So that's how we get around this. The point that has to be hammered home, whether you're an investor in the room or whether you are a realtor who's going to be explaining this to your clients in the room, is this is not low-income housing. It could still be a guy making $200,000 a year and he just wants the cheaper unit. You're putting it on the market. Your property manager is screening tenants like normal, checking credit scores. They're just renting it at or below that index. That's all it means. In terms of the energy efficiency, who cares? Because number one, we generally don't take points from it. But if you want the academic exercise, how many of you ask your architect when you're building a house why they spec a 14-inch steel beam or a 12-inch steel beam? You don't. You just need it. If you decide you want points from energy efficiency, you tell your consultant that you're paying, we want the points, and they will spec the building as needed and submit the letter to CMHC. Understanding and knowing this is outside the scope of the financial elements of these kinds of projects. All you need to understand is if you want to upgrade the energy efficiency, it's going to cost you more money. If you want to upgrade the accessibility, it's going to cost you more money. Generally, we are able to get away with all of our points in most regions from the affordable component because the cost savings of a simpler building outweigh the rental losses that may exist because we're able to engineer that building to really reduce the cost losses on those affordable units, as I explained, either through smaller units, basic finishes, or by putting them in the basement, right? higher auxiliary fees, et cetera, et cetera. So we especially focus on the affordable in Alberta, which I will explain a little bit more in a moment. So as much as I hype Ontario, overall this presentation is still about why I love Alberta. So just to recap that, right? Because there's a few elements I have not yet talked about. Number one, when you have MLI Select, you can get up to a 50-year amortization. Up to. You don't have to, but I'd recommend it. You can go up to 95% loan to cost. Now, I have seen a lot of poorly designed ads on Instagram. I've seen a lot of agents putting up bad information. It is very important to understand the words up to. There is no guarantee and no right, no privilege to having a 95% loan. The math has to work, the numbers have to work, and the borrower profile has to be strong enough. If CMHC does not believe what you're presenting to them, and we'll get into that in a little bit, or if the borrower is marginal, they may not give you 95%. Anyone promising 95%, 100%, like 100% of the time, no one can promise that. It is not a guaranteed 95%, and we tell every single client that. You're getting below prime interest. Right now, large mortgages are funding around 3.5%, right? 3.5%. You can get into 10-year terms if you want as well. So the option for 5-year or 10-year terms. You cannot do a 10-year term on your own house. You cannot do a 10-year term on the condo you bought or the townhouse with a legal basement that you bought in Richmond Hill to rent out. Why do they offer that 10-year term? Well, what year is it right now? It's early 2025. Anyone in this room know what MLI was funding loans at around 2019, 2020 during COVID? It was around 1.9% interest. Those people who picked up 10-year terms are only halfway in. So while everyone else was shitting their pants with 7% interest in 2023 and 2024, those people were sleeping very well at night, right? So if you're looking at MLI, you're looking at a performa today and you see that you can get a 10-year term at 4% or you can get a 5-year term at 3.6%. That 3.6 might look like a really sexy thing to look at, but 4% for the next 10 years and not having to ever worry and sleep well at night, do you know how much principal you've paid off in 10 years? Do you know how much appreciation you have in 10 years just through inflation alone, nominal appreciation, meaning that if you ever need to refinance then, you have a ton of fat. Just think of how much rents increase over any 10-year period, right? In 5 years, 5 years is not that long in the real estate business. If rates go up substantially, you could be in trouble. But over a 10-year period, you're all but guaranteed to be safe, pretty much. So in my opinion, always take the 10 years, unless, you know, for some weird reason there's a huge gap. But that 10 years, it's security. When we talk to people who are used to these small investments like condos and houses, and they're looking at the mortgage size on buying an 8-plex or 10-plex, sometimes it's a little scary to say, oh my God, I'm responsible for a $3 million loan, a $4 million loan, $5 million loan. They can't come to terms with it in their head. Knowing the security you have in a 10-year long term where your interest is not going to change and it's cash flowing at day one provides a lot of comfort. So it means at the end of the day, you end up with high return on investment and positive cash flow. But how is that possible? Because everything else out there in this market is losing money, right? And it's because we can't just get any project approved with CMHC. So as I was saying earlier about that 95% loan to value, CMHC has to buy what you're selling. There's a third-party sanity check here. When we submit a file to CMHC, they are doing their own analysis to determine the project's projected cash flows. Now, obviously, no one can predict the future, right? No one can predict the future at all. But they go through a project, they look at all the relevant market data, their own rental reporting data, comparables across the street, property manager information, et cetera, and then they go as conservative as they can on these numbers, and they want to see that at the minimum, that the project has a cash flow of 110% over its carrying costs, or what we call a debt service coverage ratio. So the debt service coverage ratio is very simple. If your mortgage costs $100 a month, you need an operating income of 110. That's 110%. That's the minimum, meaning that CMHC's requirement is a 10% buffer. Generally, the projects we offer, the projects we underwrite and look at, have a minimum of 115%. Because why go to the minimum, right? Like, no one wants to buy a house that was built to the minimum. No one wants to buy a car that was built to the minimum. This gives you a lot of extra safety. If the market changes, taxes go up, vacancies go up, whatever it is, it gives you a big buffer range to ensure you're not paying out of your own pocket every month, right? Because no one can predict the future. So why on earth wouldn't you leverage government-backed financing programs to maximize your investment? Why would you want to swim upstream when you can swim with the current and make profit, right? Why would you want to sink when you could swim? Why would you want to take the same deposit and buy a condo right now that loses $1,000 a month when that deposit you can make $1,000 a month? To me, it's just common sense, right? It's just absolute common sense. And what I hear all the time is, that sounds great, that sounds amazing, but it almost sounds too good to be true, because if everything else is losing money, everyone else is getting killed out there, how can you have this magic fairy dust program that's just so easy and you just automatically make cash flow every month? Like, paper is paper, reality is reality. Well, the answer is because typical government form, they actually came out with something pretty good, but they don't understand how to properly align the interests of parties. And what I mean by that is, building is really fucking hard business, right? The steps involved in building, I've outlined them at a very high level here, but the very first thing you have to do is find land that works. And especially these days, knowing that CMHC has removed a whole type of product from the equation, you have to find land where you can build something CMHC wants and that the municipality wants. Often competing interests, because I'm sure you guys read the news, the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipalities don't seem to ever talk to each other about anything or plan anything, right? So the biggest challenge is actually just finding a site. Then it's getting it approved in a reasonable amount of time. Then it's actually designing something that people want and works with CMHC. Then it's applying to CMHC. Then comes another scary part, building it. Because certainly I'm not a builder. I wouldn't know if I'm paying the right price for a 2x4, or if that cost of labor is correct, or if that timeline is correct. And if you try to go build something without knowing, you're going to get killed on price. They can smell blood in the water from miles away. Then you have to actually manage this property. You have to lease it up, you have to stabilize it, and you have to do ongoing management. And if any of you own investment units, you know, many of you put up your hand, you own a condo downtown or near a university, even one unit, how often do tenants call you because something's broken, something's not working, they need an extension on their rent, blah, 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 blah. So there's a misalignment with this program in that there's many people who want to be a landlord or a real estate investor, but there's not a lot of people who want to do this. This is not passive work. This is an active, full-time job that requires a deep knowledge and skill set. And in general, you have to have thick skin to work in the construction industry. So the challenge is not that this program is all fairy dust and pixies and only works in theory. It works very, very well. Trust me, there's lots of people making millions, if not billions of dollars with CMHC MLI. The problem is that the group of people who want to be landlords does not often overlap with the people who want to be builders. And that is kind of what we have done. We have connected the dots because we have 15 years experience selling pre-construction, and we also have a long history of selling and working in multifamily and commercial. And when we were thinking about this program, as the market changed, we wanted to swim, and we thought, what if we just took this whole thing out of the equation? What if we went to builders who have already bought land, they've already designed appropriate projects, and we could just package it up turnkey? So that's what the unique situation here, that's what the unique play here is, not having to worry about any of this. So we've already vetted all these projects, made sure they work wherever they are, right? I showed you one in Ontario at the beginning of this, so that you as an investor or a realtor don't have to do any of that. Just like buying a pre-construction, just like going into Tridell's sales center and buying a condo, the price is the price, here's your home. And beyond even what you do in pre-construction, we have all of the people in the later stages that are needed, the underwriters, the environmental guys, the appraisers, the broker that's going to take it to the lenders themselves to ensure you get the best financing, and then the property manager who's going to manage it so that you're not getting calls at 2 in the morning when the dishwasher breaks. So what are the requirements to actually invest in a project like this? Because obviously if you're buying a $3 million or $4 million or $2 million, opportunity, it's substantially more than buying a condo in Toronto for $500K or whatever. But that's the other thing that's really interesting about commercial financing, your personal income is irrelevant, right? And going back to the very beginning of this, when I said maybe society doesn't teach people properly, most people don't know this. They don't know that whether you use MLI or not, it's actually easier to buy a multi-unit building than it is to buy a single home or even a home with a legal basement. CMHC requires 5 units. Generally, banks consider anything over 4 units to be multi, but we'll just keep it simple and stick with 5. When you get into multi-unit, you are getting commercial credit facilities. You are not getting a personal loan. So the first thing is, no longer does your personal income matter, because they are qualifying the building on the strength of its own ability to carry the mortgage. That's why that 110% debt service matters. Because think about it, imagine an extreme example, a 100-unit building that's $25 million. Who would ever have enough personal income? I don't care if you're a Toronto Raptor, you're not gonna have enough personal income to carry that mortgage. When you're under 5 units or under 4 units, you have to have personal income to carry it, which becomes an extreme burden if you're trying to build wealth and build a portfolio of real estate. When you get into proper multi-unit commercial credit, it does not matter if, and when I say that, I'm not saying that like, haha, you still have to have a good income. We did a deal with a retiree who has 0 income. Literally, they file 0 on their tax returns. Their statement, what do you call it? Their notice of assessment is 0. 0, 0, 0. It does not matter. It is all about equity. If you have the equity, you are good to go. What you need is that deposit. Obviously, it's going to be between 5 and 10%. Most of our deals are 5% deals, but you should always have a little extra ready. CMHC, we never know what we're going to get, but generally, you want the 5 to 10. Liquidity, depending on the type of project, between 10 and 20%. So what is liquidity? That's just things you can turn into cash, right? So it could be cash, could be gold, stocks, bonds, lines of credit. If you have a $200,000 line of credit, you have $200,000 in liquidity. If you have $200,000 in the bank, now you have $400,000 in liquidity. We have a calculator on our website that makes it extremely easy. You just fill it out and it will tell you exactly what your purchasing power for this type of product is. The final element is a net worth. So they want to see that overall, you have a net worth of approximately 25% of the project value. So let's put this in very simple numbers. $2 million project, right? You need $100,000 for the deposit. You need at least $200,000 in liquid assets, and you need a net worth of at least $500,000. The liquid assets and the net worth overlap. So if you had 500 grand in cash, for example, you're good to go. That's the whole bucket, right? The only real asterisk on this, not that asterisk, but is that it must be Canadian assets. They don't care if you have $25 million in the bank in the US or anywhere else, it's 0. Has to be in Canada. It can be US stocks, but it's in a Canadian trading account, right? As long as it's in Canadian banks or whatever. People always ask me, what about other assets, luxury cars, blah, blah, blah. Don't get into that. I mean, CMHC will count them for something, but they're going to discount that like 90%, right? They like traditional assets, cash, bonds, stock, car, lines of credit, that sort of thing. Don't come to me with Bitcoin. The bank is not modern. They count it as 0. But we do have solutions if that's all you have as well. There's lenders out there that will lend you real cash against your Bitcoin. We have done deals that way, so we can solve those problems. But the takeaway here is your personal situation does not matter. As long as you have the cash, you're good to go. Now, there are extreme examples. If your credit score is super low, like ridiculously low, they'll have some questions, but most people who have $500,000 of cash don't have a low credit score, right? But the takeaway again, this is not a personal loan. This will not show up on your personal credit either. So another challenge people have when they're investing at a retail level is you've bought 1 condo, you bought 2 condos, you bought 3 condos. Even if you have really good income, the banks now, starting around 2021, I think, they really don't like giving out too many mortgages to one person. Even if your income is solid, they just see it as a big risk. And you end up having to go to B lenders, or they're giving you higher and higher rates, lower loan to values as you get more mortgages. You can do 10 CMHC deals, assuming you have the equity. The bank that you then go to buy your house from won't even know you have this. So you could literally buy a $10 million apartment building one day and buy your house the next day, and they won't have any problem, concern. Again, assuming you qualify for these things, right? But my point is that it's not on you. There's no mark on your personal credit when you're in commercial financing. Even the limited recourse, the limited personal guarantees, Those are contractual. They are not a mark on your credit. People really have struggled to understand this, but this is why I say that, we probably should be teaching people better how the real world of commercial financing works, because it's way more attractive. It's way more attractive to buy something where your income doesn't matter and it doesn't show up on your credit. Like common sense, right? So the summary of this whole thing, you have government-backed loans. They're not from the government, they are backed by the government via insurance. You can get up to 95% financing with up to 50-year mortgages, up to 10-year terms, and the lowest fixed rate loans you will find anywhere on the planet. You have a third party making sure that you're not completely insane and these numbers are within the realm of possibility, generally extremely conservative on the numbers. And you have a fixed price contract, so there's no construction risk like you would have if you decided you want to build your own building. Just like a pre-construction, if they say it's X dollars, they deliver it for X. Whether the builder makes money or not is their problem, not yours. So how can you lose with a program like this? But you can't, right? I mean, again, you can't. But there's more. There's one last thing about this program, and this part is the craziest part. It's the pari passu lending. So what is pari passu lending? Well, pari passu is a Latin term, which means side by side, equal footing. Early opera developed pari passu, a solo song. I don't know why that's the quote we have up there. We probably got it from ChatGPT. But what does it mean? Pari passu lending, it's not exclusive to CMHC, but it is a feature of their program. What are you going to do with this thing in 5 years if the market goes up? Or in 2 years if the market goes up? Or in 10 years if the market goes up? I don't really like to sell real estate. You sell it, you pay capital gains. But if it went up 30, 40% in value over that time, or 40, 50% in value, you have all this equity sitting there doing nothing. You have a ton of cash flow sitting there doing nothing. Well, CMHC allows you to refinance without breaking your mortgage. They allow you to put a second mortgage, but treat it like a first mortgage, hence the equal footing, right? So what they're doing is, let's say originally your mortgage is $1 million. The new valuation can support $1.2 million. They're going to add on that other mortgage behind the first, but kind of squeeze it in beside and treat it as a second first mortgage. So you're able to pull out that equity, but because it's treated as a second first mortgage, you're not paying second mortgage rates. You're still paying prime interest rates, whatever they are that day. They might be different than the mortgage you did years ago, but you're still getting prime rates because you're really dealing with the same creditor. You're dealing with CMHC at the end of the day. I mean, there's a lender, but the creditor is CMHC because of the insurance. So because of that, what does it really mean? A lot of the time, very early on, with even marginal appreciation, you can pull out your initial investment. You can end up owning these apartment buildings potentially for free, right? Now, I say potentially because we'll take questions at the end. Potentially because market conditions have to allow it, right? Obviously, markets go up, markets go down over the short run. Over the long run, look back 100 years, I mean, long enough run, markets have pretty much only gone up. But over a 2, 3, 4 year period, no one can predict where markets go. Anyone who can, I'd love to see them prove it. But over a long run, markets do go up, you can get that equity out. And if you're lucky, you can get that equity out in the short run. You can pull that equity out and you can potentially, either go do something else with it, or if you're really smart, go buy more real estate. And this is where I always say this is the opportunity to build actual wealth. Because think about it, there is many landlords in this country that own hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of units. There is private landlords you've never heard of that own 10,000 doors, 20,000 doors, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. They've owned them and they've built those portfolios. There's public guys too, but there's so many of these private guys. How do you think they got that? They weren't making $30 million a year. They did it by buying real estate that had good upside, getting a little bit lucky with market conditions, pulling out that equity, and buying more real estate. Rinse and repeat until you're satisfied. What do you want out of life, right? Some guys are happy with 50 doors, 100 doors. Some guys have an unending hunger and want 1,000 doors or 10,000 doors. But the point is that using commercial lending, these options exist to you because you can pull that equity out and you can buy more buildings that self-support themselves and you can keep cycling that capital. When you're buying individual condos, you're going to run into a wall one way or another. For most people, it's going to be their personal income eventually will not be able to support the mortgage, or if they're a super high earner, they're still going to hit a wall where banks don't want to give them more personal loans, right? And there is really no maximum to what CMHC or commercial lending will get you to, like not for anyone in this room at least. And I don't say that in an insult. I'm saying unless you have 9 or 10 zeros in your bank account, you're not going to hit large lender status with CMHC and have any rule differences. So unlike buying an individual condo, this is actually wealth construction. And I don't believe that buying individual units, I'm going to get in trouble with Toronto builders again, but I don't believe that individual unit purchasing, a condo here, a townhouse there with a basement, I don't think it's a logical path. I think it's something people do because other people do it. And the reason is because owning real estate is still work. What's the point of owning one house to deal with one tenant who's a pain in the ass, repairs, maintenance, blah, 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 filing your taxes at the end of the year, bookkeeping, all the bullshit that goes along with it, if it's not going to make you any money? And even if you're lucky enough to have bought at the right time where that condo is making you a few $100 a month, what's the point? A few $100 a month is not respectfully changing anyone's life. It's not putting you in business class on an airplane or a private jet if you're really ambitious. But going from 8 doors to 20 doors to 50 doors to 200 doors over a 10 or 15-year period is changing your life, right? It is generating enough money that you can actually stop your day job if you want, or you can fly business class if you want. Because if you own 100 units, you're, depending on your financing, your leverage level, bringing in anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 a month in free cash flow. That's a life-changing thing. Owning one unit and making $300 a month isn't. And as long as market conditions are decent, you should be able to cycle that capital 3 or 4 years. There's an easy pathway to turning an 8-plex or a 10-plex into 50 or 100 doors over that 10 or 15-year period and actually building real wealth, changing your future. And this is the part most people really never thought of, right? And it's the real way to accelerate wealth construction. I mean, it's what I'm doing. I'm not here to make $50 or $300 a month. Like, that's not my goal. My goal is to fly business class everywhere and not worry about anything, although I do worry a lot. It's like playing the game with cheat codes on to have this, because you don't need more money. You don't need more income. You don't have a bank battling you. It's just you being in the market at the right time, building up a little more equity, pulling out that equity and buying more. It's playing the game with cheat codes on. So let's talk about why Alberta is so attractive. Don't get me wrong, those Ontario ones we're going to release are going to be great. But I will tell you right now, because I'm a straight shooter, the returns in Ontario will not be as high as the stuff we have in Alberta. So you might say, Jake, why are you offering stuff in Ontario? Because there is a subset of people, probably some in this room, that will not buy in Alberta for one way or another. They have their preconceived notions, they have their taboos, whatever you want to call it, all the cool real estate terms. Some people just don't think Alberta's a good market. Okay, whatever, fine. We'll bring you stuff in other places. My money is in Alberta, and I'm going to tell you why. We will still sell the Ontario stuff. The returns are still great. They're still risk-adjusted above returns you can get other places, but Alberta is where it's at right now. The Alberta advantage. This is not a thing I made up, although I'd love to take credit for you. This is Alberta's mission statement. It's their provincial ethos. I am not that fancy of a speaker, so I will never say mission statement again. I will say the Alberta advantage is the provincial ethos, and it refers to the features that differentiate Alberta from other Canadian provinces, specifically to attract private sector investment, reduce red tape for business, and diversify their economy. Now, if you want to get rid of all of the fancy speak, basically, they want to make sure that if tomorrow no one uses oil anymore, they still have a province to run. What do? Low taxes. Make it easy to open business. Who would have thought? Crazy, right? Such a complex idea. They have a massive tech hub and AI center going on there. Edmonton is set to become North America's next big tech hub with a 54% surge in tech employment over 5 years. Northwest Alberta is about to host the largest data center in the world. There's a picture of it. We even got the eagle in there, you know, everything. Wow. Kevin O'Leary brought that in. Love the guy or hate the guy. It's a $70 billion project the world's largest data center focused on AI. Why did they go to Alberta? A couple reasons. Low taxes, highly trained staff or employment options. Most importantly, it takes a shitload of energy to run one of these things. What do they have in Alberta? Lots of energy. Energy is in no short supply, and it sure is cheap. This alone is 5,000 high-paying technology jobs. Alberta has transformed itself. You can Google for days. People ask me every day, what happens if the oil goes down? What happens if there's an oil crash? Oil crash. I'm like, bro, we're not even in an oil boom. I lived in Alberta in 2004. I went to university there, 2004 to 2008. That was an oil boom. Oil was at $180 a barrel. People with a grade 7 education drove $100,000 cars, okay? I had buddies in 2004, left university, went and got jobs in the oil fields making 250 grand a year. That was an oil boom. We are not even in an oil boom. The reason Alberta is doing well is because it's the only place in the country where it's affordable to live. There's a huge demand for housing. Alberta's population surged 4%. It's the fastest growth in Canada. It's the fastest net interprovincial migration in the country. And it's a very different person moving there. It's not even that many new immigrants. Although there's a huge population of new immigrants there, it's actually a lot of established Canadians who are fed up with Vancouver, they're fed up with Toronto, they're fed up with Montreal, because they don't want to spend $500,000 to live in a shoebox. Because for $500,000, you can buy a house. So if you have a tech job where you can work anywhere in the country, why wouldn't you move there? Right? Housing starts were down year over year in Edmonton, believe it or not. They were down 17%. So you have a huge internal migration, and you have actually less construction in Alberta. As many seminars as we've been running, it's solid gold. And that is why I have picked up 42 units there in the last 5 months. That is why we sold so many units there over the last few months. And that is why it offers the highest possible returns on investment. We have the great stuff in Ontario. If you want the more blue chip, if you think Ontario is amazing, 16 million people live here. There's nothing wrong with Ontario. I live here. My office is here. But if you want the highest return on investment, Alberta is the best place in this country to invest right now. The other element is the affordability index that we talked about earlier. So every different neighborhood in Canada has its own affordability index. Because Alberta, both Calgary and Edmonton, have such high median incomes, basically the highest in the country, you have the highest affordability in the country. To put that in perspective, $1,665 a month in Edmonton, $1,740 in Calgary. Most of Ontario is at or below $1,200. So up until very recently, building in Ontario is more expensive, taxes are higher, and you can only charge $1,200 for your affordable unit, versus in Edmonton where you can build it cheaper, you pay less tax, and you can charge $1,665, or in Calgary $1,740. It's very easy to understand why when we paper these things out, they look so attractive in Alberta. This is a huge, huge element. It means we can get away with never in Edmonton or in Calgary needing to do any energy or accessibility, saving money and still making the pro formas work well. Because depending where you are in Edmonton, a 1 or 2 bedroom basement unit in a stacked town is going to rent, like a 1 bed might be between $1,100 and $1,200, a 2 bed might be between $1,200 and $1,400. Either of those are well below the affordable benchmark, meaning you're at market rent. You have no penalty. Not only do you have no penalty, you still have $200, $300, $400 of upside in there. So even if tomorrow the market went up 20%, you would still be renting at market. And this affordability is benchmarked yearly. So if inflation causes wages to rise, if rents rise, you're getting that. You're not stuck at $1,200 or something for the next 10 years, right? So you're bringing in more tech, you're bringing in more high-paying jobs. Guess what that does? If a neighborhood brings in 5,000 jobs making 200 grand a year, it pumps up the affordability numbers even higher. And that's why Alberta works. There's another beautiful thing. They love the word no. If this was Ontario, we just delete the word no, and we just put check marks beside each one in Olivia Chow's face. No land transfer taxes, no development charges, no hookups and municipal levies and cash in lieu, no parkland, none of that shit that shouldn't exist in the first place. 30 to 40% of the cost of a house in Ontario is taxes and fees. Who here was at Ryan's seminar on Monday to dive in with developers, right? Even I was shocked when he asked everyone, put up your hand and guess, is the taxes and fees on a new one-bedroom condo $100,000 or $150,000? I put up $100,000, and I was wrong. It's $150,000. Think about that. $500,000 condo, $150,000 is going to what exactly? Because I'm certainly not getting my roads fixed anyways. But $150,000 fucking dollars in taxes, and then they go up there and they go, we have an affordability problem. We need to get more housing built. Well, boom, there you go, 150 grand less in Alberta, right? The land transfer tax, people don't realize how bad that is, because if a builder buys land in Ontario to build, they have to pay the land transfer tax. And then when they sell the units, they have to pay the land transfer tax. So just for taking on the risk of building something, you're paying 2 land transfer taxes. HST and all of that is on top of those taxes. It's tax on tax on tax on tax. It's a beautiful place to live, Ontario. Lower cost to build, less fees. Here's my favorite part, because I own 2 apartment buildings in Toronto, okay? I'm not even gonna say anything. There's no rent control. Security deposits are legal. Auxiliary fees are chargeable and enforceable. You don't want pets in your building. You want to charge someone $100 because they have a 70-pound black lab with uncut toenails that's going to destroy your floors. Go nuts. It's like a commercial lease. Whatever you write in it is binding within reason. You know, you can't like sell people's kids off, but whatever you write in the lease is binding. And I don't think people realize how beautiful just a security deposit is. The single biggest cost in, you know, miscellaneous costs or maintenance on a building is turnover. You turn over a unit when someone moves out, they never clean it in Ontario. Are you kidding me? I have 2 buildings. Every time we turn a unit, it's fucking filthy. Things are always broken. There's damage to the paint. There's holes in the wall. There's no security deposit. So you repair that. You fix the holes. You get a fresh coat of paint on the walls. You bring in a cleaning lady to deep clean it so it shows well. How are you going to get that money back? You ask the tenant, they give you the middle finger. What are you going to do? Take them to the landlord-tenant board for $500? Well, first of all, the application fee I think right now is $181. Then you're going to wait a year, and maybe if you're lucky, you can prove these things because they're socialists on there, and they're going to tell you you probably photoshopped the picture or something. And then what? You actually win the ruling. How are you going to collect? Because there's no enforcement at the landlord-tenant board. If the tenant gives you the finger again, you got to go to small claims court and sue them with your ruling. Who's going to do that for $500? You know what you do? Write it off cost of business. Put it in your pro forma, miscellaneous, maintenance, whatever you want to put it, $500 a year per unit. When you have a security deposit, an extra month's rent, guess what? Well, 2 things actually happen. Number 1, magically the tenants leave the units clean and without damage. Who would have thought having consequences makes a difference? But secondly, if they don't, you just deduct it from their security deposit. Why should you be paying out of pocket to fix the holes and clean the unit that they're supposed to leave with no holes and clean, right? So it makes a huge difference. But here's the best part. This is the part that I dream of night, okay? I don't dream of much else because I own 2 buildings in Ontario. I'll tell you again. You can evict tenants in 14 days in Alberta, okay? 14 days. Most evictions happen in 9 or 10 days. They don't pay their rent. Get the hell out of my house. How long does it take here? Infinite time. The sun burns out before you get your eviction. If you're lucky, we hear the horror stories. People buy houses to move into and end up living in their car. I don't know how many stories like that I've seen in the news. 14 days. When you look at pro formas that show 3% vacancy and bad debt, 4% vacancy and bad debt, how can we actually use that number in Ontario when we know the consequences, even in an 8 or 10 unit building, if you have 1 tenant not paying their rent and they're stuck for 16 months, 20 months, 24 months, how can you use 3% bad debt and vacancy? The risk is so high. 14 days, get out. And the only reason for an appeal is that they actually paid their rent and you're just a bad landlord and lying about it, which is a valid reason, you know? But even then, it is heard and decided on within 28 days. There is no sob stories. There is no payment plans. There's no my kid goes to the school, blah, blah, blah. If they don't pay their rent, they are evicted. Just like how if you walk into Lululemon and steal a pair of pants, you get arrested. It's common sense, right? It's not that Alberta is landlord friendly. It's that they have common sense and fair contract law. But this alone can make a difference of literally a landlord going bankrupt or not. How many landlords in Ontario have lost everything because of bad rulings where they end up $30,000, $40,000 without rent, and the bank doesn't let you go to the landlord-tenant board? Certainly not, right? So when you add that all up, it's the Alberta Advantage. Now, they don't write this stuff in the Alberta Advantage ethos, but I do. So it's the magic formula. You have strict laws against tenants, you have low delivery costs, you have favorable financing that works well with their affordable index, and that just yields stable, high cash flows with low deposits. So again, I'm still super hyped about our Ontario stuff, but this stuff is like, you know, caviar. And the other thing is, how long will this last? You know, I'm not a big sales guy that pitches and says, like, you gotta buy tomorrow, you're gonna miss out. But we already saw CMHC cut out detached housing. We already saw that happen. For the last 3 years, people were buying detached houses with this program, going crazy. It's gone. What's next, right? I already know lenders don't like to do the construction loans on the smaller size projects anymore. We used to be able to do non-stop construction loans, 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million. We still get them done, but more and more lenders are opting out of anything under 5 million. We only have 2 or 3 that are still doing those smaller deals. The other factor, CMHC obviously not able to think too far ahead. When they changed those rules on February 26, they removed 60% of the eligible land in both Edmonton and Calgary from being usable for this program. Now, I'm actually an economist, but for those who aren't, supply and demand. If you remove more than half the available land from a program, what do you think happens? The cost of the rest of the land went up overnight for builders. 20, 30% increase in land costs. There was bidding wars across both cities because basically the only projects that still work now on the small scale are infill sites, which are very, very rare. What does that mean? Instantly overnight, most of the projects we have went up. An 8-plex went up 100,000, 150,000. Now they still work. The paper is still great, but they're not as juicy as they were 6 months ago. And they won't be as juicy 6 months from now. Whenever there's excess profits available, the market will always come in to fill them, whether that's greedier land sales, whether the trades raise their prices, whether the builders want more profit, right? When you see other people making money, you want to make more too. So we still have highly, that's not even a word. We have high ROI deals available, but I don't think we'll ever have deals as good as we had 6 months ago. And 6 months from now, we'll be wishing we had the deals we have today. So how long will this last? I don't know. Which is why I'm buying as many as I can now, because I want that certainty of getting in while the going is good. And especially one other factor, that rates are so low right now. We are now back into low rate territory, right? I mean, many people would say that 4% is a neutral rate, and we're filling a lot of these MLIs now around 3.5, 3.7. We are into low interest. We're not into 2021 interest, but I don't think we'll ever be at 2021 interest again. But the days of saying interest rates are high and they're killing the economy are gone, guys. We're not at 6%, we're not at 7%. We are in the 4s, we are in the 3s. Now is a time to lock those rates and be happy with them for the next decade, especially with the stuff going on trade war-wise that could cause inflationary pressure that causes rates to rise. And that's another factor not even in here. What are you going to do if inflation goes rampant again because of what's going on with the US? If your money's sitting in your bank account, it's losing money. If you have had your money sitting in your bank account waiting for an opportunity since 2021 or 2022, you've lost like 20% of its value. And that's if you believe the CPI numbers, because I know that in 2021 or 2020, a steak did not cost it cost much less than 20% less, right? It cost 50, 60, 70% less. So I think the true inflation is much, much higher over the last 5 years. But if we run into a secondary inflation, which looks very likely, there was an article out about it yesterday, inflation rose again to 2.7%, leaving your money sitting in your account, not going to do well, right? Because real estate assets are one of the first things that inflates. So if you can get now, while the going is still good, as the saying is, and while you can lock in low rates for 10 years, that is like your best hedge against inflation in a time when putting money in the stock market might be considered extremely risky, in my opinion at least. So, I mean, you know, how long will it be good? I don't know. But I'm buying now because everything seems to tell me that over the long run, this is going to get harder and harder to get very good returns on. Excess returns, in my opinion. Today it works, tomorrow it may not, so don't risk it. Or don't come to me in 6 months and say, I wish I could have gotten those 8 plexes at 2.4. As I say, think sink or swim, free soda or stirred. It's up to you guys at the end of the day what you want to do. So here's an example of a 8-plex we have in Edmonton, and I'll leave this one up for a little bit as well. This project is $2.4 million. With a 5% deposit, we include all of those costs. When you do commercial lending, there's costs that have to be paid. There's broker fees, there's lender fees, there's appraisals, there's environmentals that have to be paid. These costs, we roll all of that cost in. It's all included. The builder's paying those fees for you. Those fees can be substantial. Some builders, if you watch out, you might see MLIs out there that are slightly cheaper from a different builder, blah, 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 and you go, oh, sweet, Be prepared that you can have up to 2.5% fees out of pocket during the process for the brokers, for the lenders, for the ESA, the appraisal. The nice thing, why do you want it in the purchase price? Because then it's financed. When it's in the purchase price, you're only paying for 5% of it. The lender is paying the rest, and then your tenants are paying the rest. Because otherwise, 2.5% is $60,000 that you would have to come out of your own pocket for during the entire process between signing and closing, paying consultants, right? So when we sell, for the most part, we always make sure we roll as much of this in and get the builder to pay it, or offer some sort of rebate program to get that money back to you. So any of our pro formas will outline that, right? So in this project, for example, very conservatively, we have, this is in Edmonton, by the way. It's an 8-plex in a little area called Inglewood. That's the exact address. This is on our Google Drive right now. You guys can look up the inventory, or if you're here with your agent, ask them to send you the package. We have the floor plans, the neighborhood info, everything there. You have these upper 3 beds at $2,200 and these lower 2 beds at $1,350. So this is the key element with that affordability. We're still $215 below the affordable index, right? So we have lots of headway with the market price if it goes up. In here we have some parking costs and some pet fees, around 20% utilization on the pet, and we end up with a total net operating income of about $174,000, okay? We have our expenses, which I'm not gonna go through in extreme detail, but just know that they're essentially CMHC benchmark or real world examples. So real world example would be like the building across the street, right? Or an indexed price per unit, that kind of thing. Utilities are zero because these are a stacked town product, which means that there's no common area. Everything is paid for by the tenants, right? Individually metered as well. So at the end of the day, you have your operating expenses, and then you end up with your net income of about $127,000, inclusive of bad debt and vacancy, and inclusive of management and salaries. We have a mandate from a great property manager at a very good rate. By no means are you forced to use them, but obviously we're trying to make this as easy as possible for our investors. We try to turnkey it, right? If you have another property manager you want to use, whatever, more than welcome to, as long as they meet CMHC's requirements. So going back to that whole CMHC third-party sanity check, they want to know that whatever you select for property management is capable of that type of building. So for example, the property manager we use for these infill sites, this is what they do. They've never done a 300-unit building. If I selected them and submitted to CMHC for a 300-unit building, they might not like that. But when they do, they have a portfolio of 100 of these 8s and 10s and 12s they manage, they like that. It makes sense. You cannot manage this yourself. You are in Ontario right now. It is 3,000 kilometers away from Edmonton. They will laugh at you if you say you're going to self-manage it. Even if you were in Edmonton, why do you want people calling you at 2 in the morning when the dishwasher stops working? Trust me, if you own 1 unit, you already know it's bad. If you own 8, they call you about everything, okay? They call you because they don't know where the light switch is. So you have it managed, you sleep well at night, you take it easy. Now, we generally put in higher numbers here. Higher numbers, lower rents. We'd rather be conservative for 2 reasons. 1, I don't want people coming back to me and saying, Jake, it's not as good as I thought. I'd rather them coming back and saying, Jake, it's better than we thought. But the other reason is because we want to get the best terms with CMHC and with the lender. And if you push these numbers, they might cut you down a little bit. They might either reduce your loan to cost, or you might have some other terms and conditions that are undesirable in your commitment letter. So by being conservative, we're able to avoid a lot of that on most files. And that's why we'd rather be conservative. Other things here to consider are that on a brand new building, you should not really have any repairs and maintenance. We have to include it. CMHC wants to see it, the lenders want to see it. It's proper pro forma to put that there. But this building is under Alberta New Home Warranty. So if there's a defect in the building, it will be repaired under the warranty for free. The biggest source of repairs and maintenance in a building is damage by tenants, but you have security deposits. So as long as you're running your building properly, you should really have no major repairs and maintenance for the first 5 years. 5 years, $4,800. That's $25,000 more that you should theoretically have in your pocket, right? The other thing is the replacement reserve. Replacement reserve is your long-term fund for major capital projects. If you own a building long enough, you have to replace things, right? You need new furnaces, new roofs, new windows, new doors. We're talking 25, 30-year horizons here. Depending on your strategy of investment and capital cycle, you may not need a replacement reserve. CMHC does not mandate you to have a replacement reserve. In fact, if we go all the way back to that graph at the beginning, one of the perks was replacement reserve not required, right? Now, if you're not an idiot, I would recommend keeping a replacement reserve, right? Because you will eventually have to replace things. But that's not actually money out of your pocket on day 1, day 2, day 3. That's money you're saving, that you're just not spending on going out and partying or whatever it is you want to do with your money. So realistically, if we squeeze this portfolio or this pro forma or distill it down, we can add an additional $7,000 of free cash flow per year to it, right? But we don't even need to do that because it's still cash flowing wonderfully, returning a 15%, 14.3% cash flow year over year. That's your cash on cash return. That's money you're making above paying the mortgage principal and above paying all your costs and not having to do anything because the property manager is literally doing everything for you. Compare that to buying a condo right now, where you're going to lose $2,000 a month. What's the cash on cash return on losing $2,000 a month? You know, negative 10, negative 20%. It's extremely, extremely attractive, this type of investment. And that's, again, why I am buying them. This is the second page. We can't squeeze it all into one page, but basically this is kind of your long-term outlook and your sensitivity to interest rates and rents. So the very first thing I would look at is that this building will support itself even if the rents drop about 10% from projected. We're already using rents that are below the market rents out there. And if you question that, we have sample leases, recent sample leases on similar products sitting on our Google Drive with all these projects. We black out the names, obviously, but we have real-world examples of leases. Some of them, if I go back, some of them like these 3-bed uppers, even up into the 2,600s per month, depending on area and size, right? But so we're using conservative rents, and we're still able to support the building down to a 10% market drop. Or we're able to support the building, you know, even down to a 50% increase in interest. It is still heavily cash flow positive, 9% above its carrying costs. So that's the most important thing, because more than how much profit can I make, how much extra money can I make, the most important thing people want to know is what is my downside, what's my risk, right? So even at a 10% drop in rents, you're breaking even. Even at a 15% drop in rents, you might be slightly negative on your cash flows, but when you factor in your principal, you're actually still coming out ahead because your principal pay down in the first year is $14,000. Your negative cash flow is $8,500. So you're still coming out $6-7 ahead. So you need a substantial drop, right? And that doesn't include, remember, your interest, your replacement reserve, and your repairs and maintenance that don't really exist. So you would need a substantial drop to actually end up cash flow negative. That's why cash flow investing is king over appreciation investing. People in Toronto so used to, I'll lose $2,000 a month and hopefully it goes up 30% a year. But if it doesn't go up 30% a year, a lot of people are crying right now. A lot of people are crying. Whether this goes up $1 or not over the next 5 years, yeah, it's nice if it goes up. But if you're clearing, you know, $17,000 in cash flow and paying off $15,000 in your mortgage every year, who cares if it goes up or down in the first year at the end of the day? You're in pretty damn good shape. I mean, that alone is $32,000, if I can do math, about $32,000 in return without a single dollar of appreciation. You know, when you're putting down $120K, you're getting $32,000. That means your total return is around 25%, sign me up, right? Then, what happens if it actually goes up? Now, I don't like these charts that go out 5 years, because who the hell knows what's happening in 5 years? 5 years ago was COVID, right? To put in perspective how big of a change things can happen in 5 years. But in most investment pro formas will have a 5-year outlook, so we have to throw something in there. What I like is the first year. And you might say, how can I put a 10% appreciation in year one? The answer is because when we look at these projects, we have them sort of pre-appraised. And when we pre-appraise them, we're only working on projects where we know that the appraisal is at least 10% higher than that delivery cost. Otherwise, why would we sell it? Because think about it. Why would you buy a brand new building that you have to wait 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get if there was no upside, when you could just find one resale? So we have to reward the buyer by making sure they have equity appreciation in there for taking on a pre-construction. I know that might sound crazy, because for the last 10 years in Toronto, people have overpaid for pre-construction. I'll rephrase so I don't get in trouble. People have paid more for pre-construction than the resale, because by the time of delivery, the expectation was that resale went up above that and they made upside. But most people here probably don't realize that before 10 years ago, pre-construction was cheaper than resale in Toronto. Builders used to reward you for buying pre-construction. People bought pre-con to save money because they were first-time home buyers. If resale was $200,000, you buy a pre-con for $170,000. Only in the last 10 years did that flip on its head, because there was such demand and because the cost of delivery and development charges, everything else went up so much. In Alberta, we reward people for buying pre-con. We charge them below the appraised value. So this is not a speculative appreciation. Any project we sell, we want to see at least 10% upside, or else why would we sell it? And if we don't think we have 10% upside there, we would make that very apparent and tell someone the terms and conditions of that purchase. There are certain deals that are different if they're delivering very soon. We have a 42-unit building we have someone looking at right now that closes in a month. It's it's pretty much finished. There's not going to be 10% upside there because they're essentially buying a resale, just a shiny new one. They'll have 4 or 5% upside there. They don't deserve 10% because the builder took on the risk of building it in that case. The rest of it, who knows? I can't predict 5 years out. Historically, rents have gone up around 4 or 5% a year over the long run. The last 3 years in Edmonton, they've been going up 10% a year. Appreciation is going up about 10% a year. Calgary was going up about 20, 30, and then now it's gone down a little bit, right? So who can predict 4 or 5 years out? I can't, but I have to put something in there. And if rents are up 5, then since these are valued off of their cash flows, value should go up around 5. You guys can add up what these total to. It's not super important for this presentation, but I like that year one return where with that 10% upside, your total equity upside in a single year may be 150 to 250%. And this is not speculative. We just did an assignment deal on an 8-plex. Original purchase 2.3, assigned at 2.75. 5 months later, $350,000 in upside. The guy only ever had to put down 5%. So what is that? 2x his money, give or take, a little bit more for 6 months? Not a bad deal. And here's the crazy part. The buyer is still doing very well. The buyer is still in a position where we were able to raise the price a little bit to get some of his deposit back to him through an equity takeout. So everyone is still winning. The only reason the guy sold it is because he bought a lot of them and he didn't want to have that many to manage. But the original buyer made $350,000, and the new guy is basically making about $50,000 right away in equity appreciation because he still sold at $50,000 below appraised value, and it's cash flowing about $18,000 a year. Everyone's winning. So it's not made up, it's not speculative, it's the reality of the deals we're doing today. That deal closes April 1st, hopefully, because that's a silly day. One last thing, this is not my ad. I added this to the presentation last time we did it because I spend way too much time on Instagram. I have absolutely no life. I have an 18-month at home, so I just literally scroll Instagram and avoid changing diapers, basically, or spend all my time hiding in the bathroom scrolling Instagram. But the reason I have this ad up here is to show you mistakes, because I know MLI very well. I dream about it in my sleep. You can ask my wife. I'm just like, MLI, MLI. She's like, can you talk about our son? No, I talk about MLI. But there's a lot of people out there promoting false information. And I am not perfect, but I want to make sure that I provide the most correct information I can and identify ads I see that might provide false information, right? Because number one, it impacts my sales business when people think they can get things they can't. But number two, there's always people who are hopey and dreamy, and they'll take the best thing they can see, even though it might seem too good to be true. And I want to try and avoid that happening. So what's wrong in here, right? So let's go through the whole thing. Number one, only 5% down payment. I spent a good amount of time saying up to 95% financing. Anyone who tells you only, how can they guarantee that? Because if the cash flows don't work, if the price is too high, if the borrower is not strong enough, it may not be 95%. So right away, I'm concerned with that kind of thing. New government program. Well, it's definitely not new. It's been around, changes over the years, but it's definitely been in its current form for several years. Financed by the government of Canada. Well, that's just completely made up. That's just made up on a level I can't even explain, because CMHC itself actually does lending. This is not, CMHC doesn't lend these, it just provides the insurance, but the government of Canada is definitely not involved directly at all. CMHC is a crown corporation, so that's just complete bullshit. You know, own 6plex, 8plex, 20plex with low as 80K, I guess that's just creative, but the one that really got me was the interest rate of 2.8 to 3.5%. The reason that one is funny, in my opinion, is because that is actually the insurance premiums. If you read the chart that was on the first page, you go to, if you get 100 points, you get 2.8%. If you get less points, you get 3.5%. That's your insurance premium on the loan. That is not your interest rate. But do you want to buy a $2 or $3 or $5 or $10 million project from someone who doesn't know the difference between an insurance premium and an interest rate? That is very concerning. And I see ads like this on Instagram all day long, okay? All it shows me is CMHC ads or reasons to move to Thailand. I don't know what's going on with my algorithm, but that's all I get. The final thing is that they spelled amortization wrong, but you know, whatever. I guess people can't spell check before they send an ad. Anyway, I'm not, sorry? What did they spell? What else? Oh yeah, cash positive. That's just a short. I don't know, it's poor English, but whatever. They wanted to fit it on the page. But my point in general is, I'm not saying only buy from me and I'm perfect. By no means am I perfect. But I know what the difference between an interest rate is and an insurance premium. I know how to spell the word amortization. I don't promise things I cannot guarantee to be true. So whenever you're looking at this stuff, be critical. Like, don't even just trust what I'm saying. Do your own research. Be critical. I would rather talk to people who want to buy, whether they're agents or buyers, who have done a shitload of research and come to me with hard questions that I have to be able to answer, than people who just blindly trust whatever they see in an ad. Anyway, that's it. That's the end. My last slide is just a bad ad. So thank you. Thank you. And we'll take any questions you have. Sure. Sure, so the question was, sorry guys, because we do have people online and I always forget to repeat the question and they have no idea what we're talking about. So the question was, do you have to have individual metering? No, you do not. CMHC does not speak to it. Some of our projects have individual. Some will have individual per stack, but not per unit. It's economics at the end of the day. And one weird thing is that in Alberta, meter costs are actually very high, so sometimes it's not worth individually metering over just spreading out the utilities by square feet. But it's not a requirement. No. So would it still be called an eightplex? It is a legal duplex. It is code compliant. They have separate furnaces. When I say not individually metered, they may share one electrical meter. There'll still be a separate panel, but it'll be on a single meter. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, does the replacement reserve go to some sort of account? No, you're, as the investor, responsible for managing that money. So what I would do if I was a long-term investor is I would invest it in slightly higher risk things in the short run, and as time went on, move that into safer and safer assets, similar to a retirement fund, right? Because if you put $2,400 a year in the stock market for 10 years, you'll do very well. That money's gonna grow, move it over to bonds and GICs. Because once it becomes big, you don't wanna risk it anymore. But you can do whatever you want with it. You want to spend on a Ferrari, go nuts. Like, they don't, as I say, they do not require a replacement reserve. it is at your discretion to manage it correctly. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, if you're an agent, how does it work bringing it in? We operate like any other sort of listing side where we pay a co-op. Yeah, and in terms of the mechanics of a deal, what I would recommend is if you have a serious investor, we can work together to, on the same team to explain and teach them everything about the deal. Just reach out to me or Agnes and we'll put a plan together. Yes. Is there any assignment clause? So obviously a builder can write whatever they want in a contract, but generally most of our builders don't really care if you do an assignment. We are not really looking for people that are trying to flip. The one assignment we did was more because they were in a situation and they wanted to be able to offload some property due to personal. But generally most of our builders do not care if you do an assignment, but obviously they don't want the paperwork of like assignments on assignments on assignments all day long. Yes. Yes. So Gagan asked if we're doing some sort of investment partnership program. Now, I didn't speak about it here because we can only do so many of those, and my lawyer and accountant are already very unhappy with me. But essentially what we're doing is we are willing to put money in the deals with investors to show what's up, right? So we've done 3 deals now where we have contributed 1% of the 5% deposit and become a partner in the building. We did 3. I'm kind of tapped now, where I need to let that capital cycle and we can do more because I'm not a billionaire. So that's, I only have so much to go around, but we will be doing more. But personally, I'm actually doing it out of pure greed. I'm not doing it out of altruism or to prove to people these are good investments. I'm doing it because it allows me to essentially have a bigger net worth and a bigger liquidity by using other people. So it's a pure greed play. I am not doing it out of the niceness of my hearts because now I own 25% of 3 buildings that I otherwise wouldn't have had the capacity to purchase. So it worked out for me. But yes, we will do it. We have a term sheet we can send to anyone who wants. It's at our discretion if we choose to do it or not, because partnership means that you're married to that person, right? So if we don't like the person or we talk to them and we get a bad vibe or we see their credit score and it's all fucked up, then we're not going to do the deal. Sorry? Sure.
Okay, so someone on our live asked, how often does it happen that instead of 5% down payment, I would have to go 10% and are interest based on the application or just on bond yield?
So, okay, how often? Well, no one can guarantee that it hits 95.5. All of our projects on paper far exceed the debt service requirement to reach 95.5. And we generally push our buyers to be very strong applicants. Like one thing I didn't get in the super weeds here is there's the minimum requirements, 5%, 10%, 25%. We will generally tell applicants we want to see stronger because just like any bank and lending, they reserve the final decision. And even if CMHC approves it, the lender may give you better or worse terms depending on how strong you are as a borrower. So when we see extremely strong borrowers that far exceed the minimum and we have strong projects, you're pretty solid to get the 95.5. But again, it's also a government bureaucracy of a way, and it's an adjudicator, and you don't know. You get adjudicator A, and they're like 95.5, and you get adjudicator B, and they can literally say, the loan seems too big, I'll give you 93. And it's just because they want to. Should it be that way? No, it should be pure science. If the numbers are there, the numbers are there. What won't happen is, it's not like you're gonna end up at 70% or 80%. We can pretty much with 100% certainty say it'll be 90-10 or better with a very, very high chance of being at 95.5 or maybe 94.6, but we can never guarantee it because even if your application is ridiculously strong, it's at the discretion of that person, and people are people. Yes? Yes, there is an appeal process. So the question was, can you challenge if you feel the decision was unfair? There's an appeal process. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. It really depends, right? So there's no guarantee, and it's situational too. Like we've had situations where someone did get like rental achievement put on, for example, because they thought the rents were high or something, and turns out it was like that adjudicator's first time ever doing a deal in Alberta, and they're used to Ontario files and they don't know anything. And then we appealed it, and the manager was like, this guy's an idiot, and they reversed it right away. So sometimes it's because, unfortunately, CMHC is not like selective. They don't have like an 8-plex specialist for Edmonton. The same guy that does your 8-plex file today might do a 200-unit building in Newfoundland the next day, and they might not be an expert on the area. So there is an appeal process. There's not a guarantee you win the appeal. Yes?
So net worth, as you mentioned, that net worth of a person has to be 25%. And does that include the assets like home or not?
Yeah, your net worth is everything you own in Canada minus whatever you owe. But just to clarify, they want more traditional assets. Houses, bonds, stocks, right? Like they don't count your car collection and other stuff like that.
Another requirement from this is deposit is required 5 to 10% or whatever, like according to their net worth. So does the deposit and liquidity together or no?
So the question was, is your deposit part of your liquidity? No, it is separate. They want the liquidity outside of it. So the way you could really think of it is you need deposit plus liquidity of 15 total, because there could be a scenario some builders want a bigger deposit just for their own risk, right? So there are builders who want 10% deposit. Even if you get 95% down, you'll still get the 5% back at closing. But if you had to do a builder with 10% deposit, then CMHC is okay if your additional liquidity is only 5 because you're putting more deposit, right? So you could almost simplify it to say 15% total deposit and liquidity, however you spread that out. But we just say, most builders we work with only are okay with the 5%. You need that extra 10% behind. And the reason they want that is because, again, we test these down 15%, whatever. Shit happens. What they don't want, it's really more of a test to say, like, they don't want people buying things to their absolute limit. They want to know if something goes wrong tomorrow and there's a couple $1,000s that have to be accounted for, that you're not going to go bankrupt on the project, right? And the other reason they want it is because generally, for most people, this program, before we started selling it this way, was more used for you find your own land, you build your own place, right? Which means that you're not on a fixed price agreement. If you're building it yourself, if you have cost overruns, other things, they want to know there's extra fat there to handle that. So generally, you won't need to ever tap into that extra stuff, but they want to know you have the capacity. Yes, sorry, I'll go to you right next, I promise. Sorry, one more here. So the question was, do we have surface or garage? Different projects will have different things, right? So some are attached garage, some are lane garages, some are surface. Yes.
So my question is, if someone wants to invest in hospital fund, when that project goes into one by CMHC, that's the first one. The second one, is it possible for CMHC to take money at all? Because there is a timeline, like 4 months, 5 months, the rule change. They're gonna say, oh, we rejected, we don't fund anymore. And from CMHC, when the deal gonna close? Is it gonna be the same as pre-construction? Is it timeline on it, 1 year, 2 years, 6 months?
Yeah, so the question was kind of the timelines around application, approval, and then closing. So there's 2 types of lending with CMHC. There's construction draw, and then there's just mortgage. When it's a mortgage, just to explain, a mortgage is just like if you buy anything, the builder builds it, and you just get the mortgage at the end. Construction draw means that you're using the CMHC financing for the actual construction, and then it turns into a mortgage when it's done. When you do construction draw lending, we're applying immediately, because we can't start construction without the lending. When you're doing a takeout and a mortgage only, you have a 6-month window to use the certificate of insurance, which means that you kind of have to play around with your application timeline depending on when you expect the closing, right? So most of the projects we have are 12 months or less. We generally aim for projects that are overall around 9 or 10 months or less, because, well, if it's construction, it doesn't really matter, but obviously people want these things done sooner than later, and there's no reason an 8-plex should take 2 years to build. But with a takeout loan, we want to be in that short time frame, because as soon as we sign the contract, say it takes about 20 to 30 days to put the whole package together, if we're within an 8-9 month window, we can submit right away, because the queue at CMHC is going to take 40, 60, 90 days, and then we have our 6-month window to closing, right? So we're good. We try to avoid long closings because on takeout loans of that 6-month risk, right? We don't want to be sitting here waiting to apply for 6 months. What we've seen even with the detached is that files already in the queue, they're still honoring, right? So we were all nervous about that. They're choosing to honor it. Where they are being a little bit dirty, and maybe I shouldn't put this on YouTube, is that we don't know if they will honor files that were not in the queue because of the window of submission, even though the agreements were signed earlier. That doesn't really impact anything we were doing, but my understanding is that there's billions of dollars out there potentially impacted by that, and I don't think that's right. That's why I was in the Globe and Mail being quoted, but we will have to see whether CMHC decides to allow those through. I think they should, because decisions are made at the time of purchase. They're not made at the time you can apply based on their own rules. In terms of the actual timelines for construction and closing, in a normal CMHC application, you have 24 months for construction lending to be completed. If it's a very large-scale project, they can offer longer, right? If you're building a high-rise poured concrete building and it's a 4-year project, they can obviously adapt to that. But if any builder is coming to you and telling you it takes 24 months to build an 8-plex, that ain't right. You know, so that will never happen in Alberta. Yes?
When does the mortgage payment for this one start? Do they hand it over the keys, or when it's 100% occupancy for the rental?
It will happen. So the question is, when do mortgage payments start? So there's a couple things to unpack there. Number one, if you're doing a construction draw, then there's interest along the construction process. But what happens is the interest is built into the budget. So you're not paying that out of pocket. It's already built into the budget. What happens is you draw your loan for the month or the quarter, and then some of that money is used to pay the interest, right? So there's no money out of pocket during construction. Regardless, whether it's a construction draw or a mortgage, eventually it's going to become a mortgage at closing, one way or the other. When will it become a payment is when you hit stabilization, right? So you cannot, there's two answers. I'll make that a little more complicated. If it's a construction draw loan, it can only convert into a mortgage when the building is stabilized. Building is stabilized essentially when there's enough income to cover the mortgage, right? Most buildings that happens around 80% occupancy, but obviously it's going to vary a little bit. Basically, the day you hit stabilization, you'll go to the bank, you'll say, hey, we're stabilized. They'll check everything and they'll go, okay, we're a mortgage now. And on day one, if you're at 80% occupancy, then you won't be cash flowing, but you'll be breaking even, right? You want to get to that stabilization faster because you're otherwise accruing interest, and there's only so much interest built into the budget. It's never a problem. We always add a big contingency, right? Which is actually an incentive for the builder, because since these are fixed price contracts, the builder is trying to finish the faster they can, because that means they get to keep that interest reserve. So that's an alignment of goals to get the building done as fast as possible. If it is a takeout loan, basically just a closing mortgage, the builder's building with their own financing, then you may or may not have rental achievement. So I'd mentioned rental achievement earlier. Rental achievement is when CMHC says, I think your numbers are a little bit wonky, I want you to prove it, right? Which means they're only giving you that loan if you hit those rental numbers, give or take, on closing. And they're not gonna close the loan fully until you hit those numbers. They might hold back 20% or 25%. We have not had rental achievement on any files. We had it on that one file where we were able to appeal it and get rid of it. So as long as your numbers are reasonable, you will most likely not be hit by rental achievement. But even if you do get hit with rental achievement, we use reasonable numbers. So it won't be a problem. We should be able to easily exceed them, right? But CMHC can, it's discretionary if they put rental achievement. If they put rental achievement, you will still be able to get around 75 to 80% of the mortgage immediately, and then you'd have to wait until you hit the full numbers that they want to finish the closing. But again, we have not had rental achievement on any file that we have done.
There's no guarantee from the builder for
No. And anyone that does guarantee that, I know there are some people that say they guarantee that. I don't believe in anything like that that's guaranteed. And I'll tell you why. Because there is a massive, massive builder, one of the biggest builders in Canada, in Calgary. I'm not going to name their names, but in the peak times, they were, and this year, 2024, they delivered 3,000 condo units in 2024. Single largest delivery in Calgary history. One of the reasons people found this builder so attractive over the last 6 or 7 years is because they offered rental guarantees on all of their projects. What did they do a couple months ago? Pulled the rental guarantees on all of their projects. Doesn't matter. It was in the contract. There's a clause somewhere buried in there that no one read that said they reserve the right to just fuck you over at any time. They pulled those rental guarantees. If you are buying commercial property, under the basis of a builder guaranteeing you rents, just leave right now. Because that is not what a commercial investor does. Commercial investors analyze the market, determine if the prices make sense, if the rents make sense, and decide they want to be in that asset class. You should not, do you think, for example, you know, what's an example here, like Skyline REIT or Starlight REIT or any of these guys are buying buildings because they're getting guaranteed rents? No, it's because they believe the location, the building, the valuation makes sense. Rents will go up, rents will go down, vacancies will go up, vacancies will go down. A builder is not an insurance company and they're not the government. Builders offer that because times are good and they think they can sell and they think they can fill it. A guarantee only matters when shit hits the fan. And builders have proven time and time again that guarantees don't mean anything when times turn against them. Do not buy anything based off of a builder guarantee because they will get out of it one way or another. Buy it because you think that there's good sensitivity in the asset, meaning that if rents go down, vacancies go up, interest rates change, it will still be in decent shape, and because you believe in the area, believe in the rents. I don't buy things because of guarantees, I buy it because I believe in the asset. And one way or another, even if the builder would guarantee that, that means they're building that risk premium into their pricing. How else can you offer something like that? Because that is a massive liability if you're selling thousands of units. Yes, Gagan. Sure. So the very first thing that we recommend is to use our online calculator to do a very high-level pre-qualification, because unfortunately we've had a lot of people take up our broker's time who have like literally no money. So we have you fill out the online qualification, confirm kind of your general buying power. Once everything makes sense, we'll have you meet with our mortgage broker team. They'll do a very detailed pre-qualification with you, spend half an hour, 40 minutes, and really ensure what your sort of de-risked buying power is with a substantial margin for error, right? Once we know that, then, and they will also spend the time explaining the entire application process, you know, terms and conditions, what other costs may exist, risk, et cetera. We like to get all of that painful stuff out of the way so you really know every step involved, because obviously there's a lot more fine print than we talk about in a presentation. At that point, you pick something you like, contract goes out. Just like with pre-construction, most of these deals have a $10,000 deposit that's in a trust account. Contract gets signed. We ask people to sign their contract within 24 hours of receiving it, just like pre-construction. You have a cooling period, okay? You're not supposed to become a lawyer in your 24 hours. We want to see that you're putting a deposit and that you're signing the contract. The lawyers are not going to respond to you and the builder's not going to respond to you to ask for amendments until you have signed and put a deposit, because otherwise you're just wasting time. You're just taking up people's time. Most of our deals then have a 10-day cooling period, just like pre-construction. The primary purpose of that cooling period, to speak to the lawyer, right? To see if there's any landmines in the agreement, go through the legal process, make sure everything looks good and there's no issues in the contract that have to be fixed. At that point, you firm up and you're in a firm deal. Oh, sorry.
Let's say we have a 10-year loan fixed, and if you want to sell after 7 years, does the loan get transferred or we have to pay a penalty and that's a fresh money?
Question was, is this loan assumable? So the very exciting thing about CMHC MLI Select is, as far as I know, they are the only assumable loan product in the entire country in any type of lending. So that's another extremely attractive thing, right, that I didn't even mention is, you have this money that's at a very good interest rate and you're able to offer that to the next buyer, and if prices have gone up substantially, they can use pari passu financing to top up the differential. Right? So let's say in 7 years, interest rates are at 5.5%, and you have a 10-year loan at 4% or 3.7%. That's a very attractive thing in your sales pitch to be able to offer, right? So yes, they are assumable. You also, of course, could break it and pay a penalty just like any other mortgage if for some reason that made more sense. Online question?
Jake, when you say it's assumable, you mean are they selling the corporation with the asset in it? The corporation gets sold? Or is it just the asset getting sold?
You could do it either way, but the mortgage is assumable, right? So the mortgage can be transferred to the new owner either way. That is a term in CMHC loans that is offered as a perk, right? The same way, like some people, like for example, I don't know if it's still done commonly, but portable mortgages where you can take your mortgage to the next property with you. Assumable is the opposite. It's when you can pass the mortgage to the next buyer.
CMHC loan and they have to go traditional financing route and now they can't close anymore. What happens in that scenario? Can they talk to the builder and still get out?
Gagan was asking what happens for those guys that are in trouble because of the detached changes. You know, that's caveat emptor. It's buyer beware, and that is at the discretion of that builder. We don't have any of that situation. When we heard there was those rule changes, we made the necessary situation handle. But my understanding, again, there's a lot of that out there, and it's a very unfortunate situation. You know, it is what it is. I'm sure builders are trying to work with people because it's not just buyers that will have issues there. The builders up the chain have issues. What if you are a big builder that did 60 of these deals? And now you have, you know, a couple $100 million of projects in risk. So everyone will have to work together to come to solutions. I think some builders are even trying to go to the city and get their lots consolidated or change the title situation. They're looking for solutions. No one is playing a too bad, so sad card. They're all trying to work together. And one thing I will say, it's not contractual, but a lot of the builders in Alberta are very like mom and pop, so they're trying to find solutions to that. Keith, you got an online?
Does HST rebate work for commercial deals? Isn't it considered a wash if you're an HST registrant?
No, so there's a difference in HST. So the HST is a purpose-built housing sales tax rebate. It's not the same as the new housing rebate. So in what we do in Alberta is, and it comes down to the way the deals are priced. In Alberta, you sell an asset, all pre-construction is sold with the raw price, and then GST, because they don't have HST, they have GST. GST is added onto the price. It's shown as a separate line item. So in Alberta, you don't finance the sales tax. What happens with some builders, what you do is when you open a corporation, you do the self-indemnity form, you delay paying the GST, you apply for the rebate to the CRA, you submit the identity form and the rebate at the same time and say, I don't owe you anything. And it just nets out to zero. In Ontario, there's actually one little positive upside, ironically, of paying more tax because prices in Ontario are inclusive of HST. It is not a separated item. The bank finances the total purchase price, just like they do with a condo. When you buy a condo, even with the personal HST rebate, there is still some HST. You only get max $24,000, right? So what happens is you're paying the incorporated price with the HST. Since in Canada there's a 100% purpose-built rental HST rebate, you're able to apply to the CRA and get back the undiscounted HST. That's why it wasn't the total amount of HST, because you already got some HST off. So you end up getting that HST back, which almost acts in its own way like an equity takeout. So it's a weird little quirk that because there's more tax in Ontario and the way it's financed in deals, you're actually able to do an equity takeout. But it's a more complicated conversation that's probably just confusing people right now.
And we have another question. Are these deals personally guaranteed? Can I still buy other assets like a primary residence?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, depending on your personal, the question, oh, you already said it. I'm getting so good at remembering to read the question again. Are they personally guaranteed? Not necessarily. They might be corporate guaranteed as well. So as long as you're able to guarantee with a substantial amount of net worth and assets, it doesn't really matter if it's personal or corporate. What CMHC wants might also differ from what the lender wants. So CMHC might be totally fine with a corporate guarantee, but then the lender says, I want you to have 10% liability. Unfortunately, we're not like the US where they just YOLO on stuff with literally no recourse, but it would be pretty sweet if we did. Generally what happens is on construction draw loans, you will have it's again, very situational. It depends on the strength of you as a borrower. So there's no single answer, but on most average people, and when I say average people, I'm talking about people that do not own their own private jets, okay? So even if you are rich, if you're not private jet rich, you are average person for my discussion. Most private average people will have 100% exposure during the construction phase. And then after stabilization, that exposure will drop from anywhere between 40 to 25% and may decrease over time, depending on the terms you get with the lender, down to potentially zero over the long run. For a mortgage that's a takeout mortgage, it would probably start at that 40 or 25% exposure. And whether that exposure is personal or corporate, again, depends on your personal situation. If you have a corporation that makes $10 million a year and has $10 million in cash sitting in a bank account, they're probably okay with that.
And are these interests based on application or just on the bond yield?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but if the question is, basically you're getting a spread over the bond, right? So whatever the CMB is, the lenders are going to offer you a spread on top. The bigger the loan is, the better the spread will be because they're making more over less. So generally mortgages over $5 million will have around a 0.6, maybe a 0.5 spread, meaning if the bond was 3, then you're getting a 3.5. Small loans will have between 0.75 to 1.2 spread.
And last question on the forum is, can you clarify for foreign buyers how they can show their assets?
Well, foreign buyers can't really buy this product in general. It's not an excluded asset from the foreign buyer class because it is residential property. And again, I am not a lawyer, so don't take this one word for word. But you should be able to, as a foreign buyer, you'd have to basically make a corporation of where you're a minority non-controlling shareholder and transfer those assets to a Canadian citizen who has majority share. And you'd have to trust them or sign some sort of agreement I don't know about behind the scenes because control matters, right? But that's it, long and short. Yes?
How does the warranty work from the builder?
Well, most of these deals, as I said, we only work with builders who are Alberta New Home Warranty. It's very similar to Tarion. The exact terms and conditions are not the same, but instead of 7 years, it does stretch out to 10 years. And just like Tarion, it has different things that expire over time. So like, I think like foundation is 10 years, whereas like, bumper to bumper is 1 year, just like Tarion kind of thing. Yes?
The CMHC mortgage term, 10-year term, buyer can choose flexible or fixed?
No, they only do fixed. So it can be 5 or 10 years, it's a fixed rate because it's off the bonds, right? And you generally would not want to take the risk of a variable mortgage because you're talking about mortgages that could be $5-6 million, $10 million. We can't predict where the Bank of Canada rate goes. What happens if it spikes again? Like if you take that pro forma and you go from 4% to 7%, you would be crying pretty bad, right? So you wouldn't want to have in 2 years something happens politically and then there's no amount of personal income that can cover the difference. You know what I mean? So we don't gamble on these loans.
So do you secure the property applications? You apply against it. Secondly, what if any objection comes later on, like when the builder starts, their objection from the CD? How does that work?
Yeah, so the question was, are you secured prior to construction and prior to the application? So to submit to CMHC, you have to have a firm agreement of purchase and sale, and you have to have a complete package file, construction drawings, everything else, blah, 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 or else they won't accept the application. In terms of city-related issues, all of the projects we're selling are zoned and site plan approved, or as they call it out there, DP, development permit. So there's no, we're at shovel ready. We're not selling any projects, well, never say any. There's occasionally we get some sites that might be like in process, but we would always disclose that, right? And say, this is still in with the city. It's gone through its first round of comments. And we've had a project or two where, originally the building was going to be like a total of 7,000 square feet and it ended up being 6,900. But we adjust the price and we told the builder, the buyer, do you still want it? But 99.9% of the projects we sell are fully approved, shovel ready. We don't want the headache, right? We just want sites that are ready to go. Well, they would start renting prior to. So these small projects, like 6-plexes, 8-plexes, 10s, I obviously cannot guarantee it. Market conditions change, but so far, every single one of them has been 100% occupied at completion, right? If you get into big projects, like a 100-plus unit building, it will never be fully occupied because when you have that many units coming to market in an area at the same time, you create a glut, right? But there's always strategies on big buildings. You work with large building lease-up specialists to come up with a strategy. You're trying to balance your occupancy against maximizing rents, right? But on these small buildings, generally 120 to 90 days from completion, you start marketing, and renting out 6 units is usually very, very easy. If you're doing a draw loan, then it is the investor who's responsible for that loan, but the builder is bonded and insured, right? So there's protections in place. If you're doing a draw loan, you end up owning the land at the beginning of the process. The builder essentially acts like a contractor on your land. So the worst case scenario that could exist is a builder goes bankrupt, right? You don't have to worry about a builder running away with your money. They can't do that because they're only able to take the draws on work they've completed. They send out someone called a quantity surveyor. Quantity surveyor does exactly what their job sounds like. They survey the quantity of work. The builder says basically, I did $500,000 of work, right? This guy comes out and says, I see $500,000 of work, and then the bank releases the money. So you don't have to worry about like them running away with the money. The only risk that could exist is the builder goes bankrupt during construction. Obviously, we have no way to control that because a builder's a black box. They're their own financial entity. We don't know if the guy's going to Vegas every weekend and losing $1 million. But obviously, number one, we're vetting the builders and making sure we think they're long track record without any issues. Number two, if the builder were to go bankrupt during construction, you own the land, you own the work completed so far, you own the rights and the plans, and you have the loan. So you would just find a new builder to continue the project. It would obviously become a headache. It wouldn't say it would be easy. There might be cost overruns in a case like that. But what are the odds that I hate to ask that question because it's going to end up in a short skid in 5 years when a builder goes bankrupt, but like what are the odds that a well-vetted builder goes bankrupt, right? So the key is making sure you're working with a builder that is a trustworthy partner. The same thing could happen if you're renovating your house, right? So it's not ideal, but it's a rare situation when you're working with long-term proven track record builders who have been in business for years.
Is it usually the construction loan only for the private sector or banks?
That depends again if it's a draw loan or not. If it's, to be clear, if it's a mortgage only, then the builder's using their own financing. That might be from private, that might be from an A lender, a B lender. It totally depends on the builder and their credit facilities and everything else. But that's not your problem in that case. Just like a pre-con, your deposit is protected. It's either in trust or if they've released it, it's insured by Alberta New Home Warranty. If it's a draw loan, your security is that you own the land. And to be clear, the lenders, there's very limited lenders in the space that are MLI approved. So most of the lending on these small loans, just to answer your question, they don't necessarily come from the schedule banks. The schedule banks only really like super large scale loans, like 100 million, 200 million, 300 million dollars. There's a bunch of sort of private funds that do this space, but again, the rates are at bond rate interest, right? So you're talking about like CMLS, Peak Hill, ICI Bank, First National likes this stuff, but they give the worst terms. We don't really use them. ATB, which is Alberta Bank, they do a lot of this stuff, but like you won't see TD, Scotia, those guys in this space unless you're doing a $100 million kind of project. How many units in the Aplex are affordable? Well, maximum, you either need 10, 15, or 25%. Since we're doing all the points there, 25%, 2 units. 2 have to be, but because you have 4 uppers and 4 lowers, you end up with 4 lowers at the same price anyway. Any more? Oh, sorry?
Canadian citizen here living in the U.S., so non-Canadian resident can invest. Similar
You're a
to-
citizen. If you have a passport, you have a passport, right? I mean, your challenge would be if you're living in the U.S., do you have any Canadian assets? That would be your problem.
And when are these terms decided? Let's say I go through with the project. How long does it take to know what down payment will be and what interest will I get?
The down payment you will know with your certificate of insurance, which would be, depending on the project, usually 60 to 90 days from when you apply, right? And right now, CMHC is actually a little bit ahead of schedules. We're seeing some applications go through in like 30, 40 days even, but you will know the down payment basically when you get your approval from CMHC. The interest rate, you basically have 2 options on that. You can just wait and see until closing, or you can do a rate lock. So what a rate lock is, it's like you're locking in today's rate. Essentially, it's an interest rate hedge. Depending on terms and conditions that are at the lender's discretion, that might cost you 0.5% to 1%. If you use the rate lock, then you don't pay the difference. If you choose not to use the rate lock, you pay that 1%, right? So let's say the loan is $1 million, 1% is 10,000. Worst case, right? Let's say today they'll rate lock you at 3.5%. If you decide to close with that loan, the 1%, you get it back. If you decide, let's say rates go down to 2%, and you're like, sorry, I'm gonna take today's rate, they keep the 10,000. It's basically a hedge, right? So you may or may not rate lock depending on the situation. Yeah, and the closing. If the closing's a couple months from now, you probably don't want a rate lock. If it's a year from now, maybe you do because rates are pretty low. right? Worst case scenario, if rates go down enough that it's worth breaking the rate lock, you lose 10,000, but you got 1% off your interest rate, who cares? Yes?
What happens like if, let's say after 5 years the rules change again, and then like you after 10 years do you still get approved for the CMHC product?
Yeah, so just like any other mortgage, even though you have a term, you have an amortization. What happens if you don't do anything with your existing bank, right? It just renews. Your bank will always offer you a renewal based on your current mortgage. If you choose to refinance it, then you're at the discretion of whatever the rules are at the time. If you don't refinance it, if you just renew it, then they will continue to honor it until the amortization expires, just like any mortgage.
Even for the DTAC, like if investors have bought previously, they're gonna
They have a 50-year amortization. They'll get the same rules with the rate of the day. Yeah. Just like, again, think about it. Right now, there was all kinds of crazy mortgages even in the residential space over the last 10 years. They used to do 0 down deals in like 2012, right? So there's whatever rules you got approved with at the time or the rules you get at your renewal as long as you don't refinance the mortgage. All right, let's go to bed. Thanks, everyone.